Hi there, how are you doing?
Not too bad. How are you?
I'm good, thank you very much. Thank you for joining me on an interview tonight.
Thank you for
Um,
having me.
Much appreciated. And the topic that we wanted to discuss was about crime, how we got into that situation, and how people managed to steer clear and keep a clean life. So, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do and how you got here, and a little synopsis about yourself, please, and why you're joining us today?
Sure. Well, you say a little synopsis. Unfortunately for me, um, in a good way, when I deliver my synopsis, it normally takes about an hour. But I know we're limited to the time constraint, so I'll keep it brief. But uh, focusing from an employment side of things, 100% of my work over the last almost 30 years now has been in the form of some shape or form of law enforcement. Um, you will know personally, I spent a number of years in the police service here in the UK. Also spent time with the National Criminal Intelligence Service, which is now rebranded as the National Crime Agency. I spent some time at a number of councils in a fraud, benefit fraud, and a housing fraud environment. And then more recently, I've ventured into the world of debt recovery. I've been certified bailiff and court warrant officer, and there's also a degree of private investigation in there also. I also hold a number of door security or SIA badges for an array of different elements, whether it be CCTV, door supervision, or close protection. So the list goes on for me. And I can sit here and just reel it all off, but you'll probably lose interest by then.
So I guess that's hence why your name is Intelligence. You're quite skilled.
Um, I wouldn't go that far, but yeah, I've done my fair share of book work.
I suppose
Um,
you witnessed a lot of activity as well.
yes, I have done. Yes, plenty of activities. Um, I
So
would say. Sorry, I was just going to say on you mentioned the book work or study. Perhaps not done as much study as I should have done, and sort of landed on my feet in other ways with different skills. But I guess we'll get into that, uh, when we start, bouncing questions and thoughts off of each other.
okay, so the title here today was about basically staying on the straight and narrow. So within the community, we are up against a lot of different opinions and different behaviours. So what tonight we're going to do is a little bit versus crime versus being clean, straight and on
On
the
the
straight
straight
and
and
narrow.
narrow. Yeah.
That's right. Um, Sorry, I was just a bit of interference in the background. Yeah, so basically, the life that some people are brought up in is a life is not very tasteful, leading to a lot of people. Shall I talk about my own experience? A little bit about my own experience. So it's nice to hear from your point of view, your background.
Yes.
I've been up against on the other side, on the receiving side of having cuffs on myself.
Okay.
Not a pleasant situation to be in.
Yes.
Um, do you feel that it makes a difference about your upbringing to avoid such interaction with that uniform?
I believe it does. Um, it's not measured scientifically, but I do believe that your upbringing has an awful lot to do with how an individual, man or woman, black or white, turns out in later life. That's not to say that, for argument's sake, somebody who's born with a silver spoon in their mouth, who wants for nothing from day one, throws all of that wealth, if I can use that word, away to join a life of crime, looking for, looking for the glory, just to say, yes, I'm gangster number one, or whatever you want to call it. So it doesn't mean that doesn't happen. That does happen. But on the point that you raised of your upbringing, yes, I firmly believe that a poor upbringing, for whatever reasons, does have an impact on children growing up. And as we speak, we're now starting to witness that in the times that we're living in.
I would say that it's not actually just children. I think at the end of the day, yes, it starts with the children. Yes, growing up into adulthood, yes. But the majority of the time, people are trialed and been arrested as they're adults. And some of those arrests are, how can I put this? Not always necessary. You've seen a lot of information, recordings and footage that can be the stop and search, which is absolutely can be appalling to certain individuals. And it does create hate within the community and also amongst with that uniform, correct?
It certainly does. The stop and search, as we call it here in the UK, or as they say in America, stop and frisk, but in principle, it's the same procedure. This is always going to be the contentious bit. It has its benefits, but it also has its disadvantages. And unfortunately, it's the disadvantages that outweigh the advantages. Okay, so the disadvantage with stop and search is that, as you know, weekly now we are seeing figures being produced continuously that young black men are 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 now, and even 9 times now more likely to be stopped. And it's not even a matter of likely to being stopped. They are being stopped 9 times more so than their white counterpart. Now, this is where it morphs into the original question that you asked. Does it have a bearing on your upbringing? If your parents are not, and I don't want to sound
well, I can answer that. I can answer that from my point of view, because obviously I've been down that route. From my point of view, I think, and with people that I deal with, a lot of people that I deal with, they do have a history of an unsettled home or a broken down relationship. And then there's a lot of alcohol and things that shouldn't be there within the life when you're witnessing these things. So there's a lot of neglect going on at home. And so I feel that some of the times these children, whilst the adults are at home, are morphing into a family life outside of the original family home. Yes. And what I'm seeing lately, a rise in depression, a big rise in depression. I'm not just actually going to say it's because of COVID, but I think that at the end of the day, that depression has always been there in a state of oppression, if I have to say that. And I think when we look at it, who's to blame? Because I think we do a lot of blaming within the community and looking at finger pointing at in other individuals. But can we take some responsibility for our own actions and stay on the straight and narrow?
Well,
the attitude test, you think you call this, don't you?
Yeah. With the greatest will in the world, one would expect that that's what people would try to do, but unfortunately, it's the nature of the beast, or the nature of the being. People don't. I just wanted to go back to the point you raised a moment ago, with the issue of the broken home. as I said in the beginning, there are situations where, for argument's sake, I'll create an example, but people will be able to identify exactly what it is that I'm trying to say. You have a husband and a wife, and two small children. Husband just happens to be a soldier in the army and is deployed somewhere around the world to fight and defend for his country, whatever task he's been asked to do. And as a result of that, he loses his life, leaving a widow and two children behind. Now, that in essence is a broken home, okay? But not because of drugs and alcohol and so on and so forth. Yep. But what people don't then realize is that perhaps the trauma of losing a parent, in this instance the father, and this is just a hypothetical situation, has an effect, a more profound effect on one of the children than the other. So let's make this easy. The daughter grows up to accept the fact and relish the fact that her father died as a war hero fighting for his country, and honors and medals and all the rest of it. Whereas the son could never accept the father's death and fell into a world of drink and drugs to hide his emotions or feelings rather than sought help. So, as you said earlier, you can't always judge somebody without digging much deeper. It is unfair to say that 100% of people that commit crimes all come from broken homes, because that's not always the case.
No, I think there's a diverse world in here. There's always a number of reasons why there's issues within the community, etc. But it's about bridging that gap and building that trust.
Yeah.
Can I just say that some people that do have a brush with the law, sometimes their reputation is actually tarnished, and it makes it so much harder for employment or housing or anything like that. It's getting really strict now, isn't it? You get a brush with the law. In some towns, it is known that sometimes the council will go back or the police will go back and tell the council about your behaviour, then hence losing accommodation. I have had that somebody come to me and say, well, they stood a chance of losing their accommodation because the police informed them of a crime that they committed out in the community. It turned out to be not true in the end, but they nearly lost their house over it. That's the type of bad reputation, somebody just has a special name, and then somebody says, you know what, I know that name, let's just ridicule them even more. And so some people do become a target of that system, and it causes a crashing depression. And I have to say that's why people have a lot of I don't care attitude. You'll see somebody with a can in their hand or walking down the street and ignoring people. And some people just go into a recluse, and just people don't understand why the world is changing or why people's perception of each other continues to change. And that is because of the damage that constantly gets done within the community with each other, I
do.
Yeah.
You say that, if I can call it, the backlash of having a brush with the law, how it affects you later on, depending on the severity of the crime. If there's been a crime
let's
committed.
talk about petty. Let's go to the petty one.
Yes. Okay. Petty crimes. The point that I was going to make is that recently the law, and it probably has been put back because of COVID, just like everything else. But the law is being amended so that these petty offences, stealing a Mars bar when you're 9 years old, shouldn't affect when you go to school and you come out, you go to college and university, and you go to get your first job, at 25 years old, serious proper job, and you're told that, oh, sorry, you were arrested when you were 9 years old for stealing a Mars bar. Those types of petty crimes are going to be expunged and removed from persons.
That's quite good to hear, really, actually, isn't it?
Yes, because, like you say, the point that you're raising, that does affect people, and that in itself can shape somebody's life going forward. Now, I will say, because a lot of people don't know this, but you can still join the police force here in the UK, even if you yourself have a criminal record. Does that make sense?
I never knew you could do that. I thought you had to have a squeaky clean.
Right. So obviously, not if you're a former armed robber and you've served 10 years hard time for your crimes. No, but let's say you have points on your license, or you were 18 and you went out with your friends for your 18th birthday and got ridiculously drunk, and you got arrested for drunk and disorderly.
So can I ask you a question?
Yes, you can.
Sorry to interrupt there, but you just threw me into a question, being as we sort of going on about awareness. The question that I would like to ask you is that through your times of dealing with individuals, seeing probably some awful stuff, did it actually affect you mentally, where you felt a little bit depressed over a situation or something you saw?
Yes and no. I'll try to give one of my famous synopses to try and keep it all together to answer your question. Let me focus on my time in the police. I saw a lot of violence, a lot of serious drugs and criminality, and a lot of bad things happening to people. And I also witnessed a lot of death in various different shapes and forms. In particular, seeing a dead body for the first time, it might sound comical to some people, but there was elements of me that thought, oh, what if he or she gets up or tries to touch me? Because obviously, you have to physically manhandle the body once, the doctors come and certify the person dead and all the rest of it. The body has to be placed in a body bag and then transported to the mortuary for autopsy and so on and so forth. So if I can label it as the dirty work is done by your uniformed officer. And I thought, they teach you how to prepare yourself for it. And when you do come across your first dead body, 9 or 10 times or 9 out of 10 times, you're with a more seasoned officer than yourself, who will know how to deal with the situation and how to help you to deal with the situation. I was fortunate that for the first time that happened to me, I had somebody or a number of people that were far more experienced than me that, helped me to get through that situation.
So now, you're saying it's good to have a good support network around you.
Yes, yeah. But what I wanted to add to that, just as a caveat, I was I did my police service with the British Transport Police, and basically, for those who don't know, police force in England is all the same, but they're broken up into different jurisdictions. So obviously, you have the Met in London, along with the City Police, and you also have the British Transport Police, which police the rail network up and down the country. So if you go into any train station or tube station on the British Isles, you're bound to see a small British Transport Police office or British Transport Police officers.
Who's the ones that walk around and they actually carry the weapons? Which ones are they then? Because if you go to Victoria Station, you see armed police officers.
Right.
Who are they?
Right. Well, they are predominantly you will have in the old days before, let's start from 2005 when the London bombings took place. This is when the armed response units got ramped up. Those times, the British Transport Police were not armed. I completed my service back in 2009, and I didn't even have a taser yet. So you can see that things have been rolled in significantly, especially with the more terrorist attacks that or the frequency of the terrorist attacks that we've seen over the last couple of years. So you would have at the big stations. Did you say Victoria a moment ago?
I did.
Right. Okay. Victoria is a major international hub. So that would be where they would deploy armed police to do their patrol, foot patrol, but clearly they're armed. They have a 9mm Glock and also a MP5 Heckler and Koch submachine gun or machine gun.
It's quite alarming when you see that. I mean, that's something you would see in the USA, but to come over here, you're seeing more and more. It's like it's the norm now,
Well, unfortunately, that in itself, I'll hold that thought for a moment, because that's another area of it, and I'd like to add a bit to that. But I just want to go back to the differences, what you were asking me. Now, let's say from about 2015, the British Transport Police also have an armed unit. Okay, so what it means is that they don't have to rush or wait for the Metropolitan Police to turn up to take jurisdiction on their network or their train station. And I will say, having served in there is a lot of politics between police forces. You wouldn't think that, but there is. Oh, you crossed over the line. Oh, you're on our patch doing this and you shouldn't. There's a lot of that nonsense that goes on. So now what you will see on a station like Victoria is a large number of British Transport Police officers, and you can identify those differently from the Metropolitan Police officers because they will be wearing the yellow high-vis jacket at all times to signify, because obviously they can run into a tunnel at any minute. So, whereas the Met dress in that combat black or very, very dark blue.
So how do the public, I don't know if they ever will, but I can't speak on her behalf. For me, the uniform, I hear people say to me, oh, it makes their skin boil when they see the uniform. It triggers so many memories. And I've been there, and I can include myself in this, that when I see the uniform, I'm already intimidated. I'm already got my back up. And it's only purely because of triggers, and those triggers are when you're mistreated or manhandled or falsely accused, or you haven't been listened to, or they think you haven't been listened to, or your situation has ended up so badly where you asked for help didn't arrive, and it feels like you're being let down. So that uniform is a big trigger to a lot of people, and it's supposed to have been, we're here to serve, we're here to help you, but it's the reverse roles now. I wonder, when I see protests and riots, I wonder how some of those people in uniform actually feel, because they actually, like yourself, joined to do a service for the community to make the world a better place. But when they're at protests, they're ridiculed, they're spat on, they're attacked. That's someone's child still, no matter how old they are. That's someone's child there to just say, I wanted to do this job to make the world a better place, but I'm being ridiculed over it just because of the uniform and what it stands for, serve and protect. But other people feel that they've been let down. They feel that there's racism, I have to say that, injustices, racial bias, that's probably the best word to put, isn't it? Several injustices, and it's about reputation, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
No matter who is faced with who, and how you handle that. Now, as I was talking about mental health, okay, did you have to ever attend anybody that had mental health?
Many times over.
Do you feel that mental health or the issues when somebody is distressed is understood?
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say today in 2020, I would expect that officers are better trained in mental health and better trained full stop than I was trained. Let's see, 17 years ago now. I would like to think that it's come a lot better in knowing the signs and what to look for. I'm going to jump in here because I presume you're going to ask me, you know, what my experiences were further to that. And what I will say is, you know, you get a call on the radio to attend somewhere. There's a man walking down the street, semi-naked, you know, shouting and screaming. You get there, it's exactly as you've been told on the radio, and instantly you make a decision. Yeah, he's got mental health. Yes, of course, you try and talk to the person, find out what their name is, what's happened to them, why they're walking down the street like this. But in record time, and when I say record time, I mean, you know, you and your colleague, once you see that the person is probably also under the influence of drink and drugs also, and given that, you know, they're walking barefoot and pretty much naked in the street, there has to be a degree of mental health here. So you then apply the law to that, and that's what's important here, is what I'm saying to you. You apply the law, and that states that we as the officers determine that this person should be detained under 136 of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act. Okay.
But that takes a mental health assessment, correct? Mental health worker to sit beside, assess the situation.
Well, now you're running away. This is myself and my colleague in the middle of a high street somewhere in the country. And this is what we've been presented with. So we make that decision. We have our superior officers shouting down the radio at you. What's happening? Where are you? What are you doing? Okay, Governor, it is as it is on the radio. We've detained the individual for 136. Okay, crack on. Now, what that then means is myself and my colleague now have to convey this person to a place of safety. That's also important, very important, because prior to, you know, what you may believe, a police station is not a place of safety. So you see, when, you know, we're raising our children, and, you know, in the days of when there was a police station on sort of every corner of wherever you lived, but there isn't now, but, you know, you'd say to your child, if anything ever happens, run quickly and run into a police station. It's a place of safety. Yes?
Mm.
When you apply the law now, you'll find that a police station for someone in particular with mental health is not deemed as a place of safety. So the next best place is to convey the person, whoever he or she is, to the nearest hospital where practicable. And then the saga further begins, because you now have to say to the doctors and the nurses, this is the situation. We got there, we found this. Gentleman or lady has been behaving as you see how they're behaving in front of you now, and we deem that, you know, they're not fit to be on the street. And they will look at the person, try to make, you know, contact or communicate with the person, and very quickly they will assess, well, okay, yeah, you know, we think this person needs to stay here until such time that they can be released. So in essence, your job is done as a police officer, although you must accompany the person. Okay, and that has repercussions later on for the officers, whichever way, but that's another story for another day. So let's assume it's myself and my colleague, and my colleague is the driver, 10 out of 10, I'm now left at the hospital, making sure that the hospital staff can administer whatever treatment the individual needs. Yeah.
That's kind of the handover for what I know now. It's a handover point.
Yes.
So you know, I mean, it's one of the things I hate, you know, when you watch, and I'm actually going to think this is probably relatable to a lot of people who have had a brush for the law and who have been frantic. One of the things that I can actually see, and I have witnessed myself or been in, is that sometimes people can be hysterical because something major has really happened to them.
Yes, that's right.
But I don't feel that sometimes that it's looked at as you're shouting. Pictures go up when somebody is describing distress, when they are distressed. But when people say you're shouting, it's almost like it's held against them, and it annoys the person that's actually speaking to the person in uniform, trying to deliver what's just happened. So it takes the focus off of what's happened, and the argument becomes between the uniform and the victim saying, look, well, this has just happened, and because they're doing it in such a manner where it's deemed as, oh, they're raising their voice, they're loud, you know, displaying something, you know, it is a tough one, but the damage can be done at that moment in time when an officer or someone says to that person, especially if they said, I've just been hit, you're shouting, in reverse it. If you don't stop shouting, I'm going to arrest you. You see, that's the part that does the damage, because because the victim becomes victimized again, and then, you know, until they calm down. So they've got a catch-22. They've run to the uniform for help, but the uniform turns it around sometimes. I can't speak for everyone. I can only speak on experience. Sometimes there's been some really major bad experiences where the individual would turn around and ridicule that person that has been hostile, they call it, hostile. And do you think that's because the patience has run out?
I think, one, the patience has run out. But what I would say to that also is that the more, or you'd like to think, but in my experience, the more experienced officer deals with the situation differently.
More calmer?
No. This isn't anything to do with karma. This is understanding how
body language.
Okay, body language, but I don't want to trivialize what you're saying, but I'm saying understand the game, understand the environment you're in. There is a lot of politics within the police, whether it's City of London, British Transport, Strathclyde, Republic of Northern Ireland, you know, Garda, Síochána, whichever police force it is, there is always politics within. So, for argument's sake, the young officers who've just come out of training school have been prepped to arrest, because when you arrest lots of people, it shows that you're busy and you make a name for yourself, and you will climb the ranks very quickly. Okay? I knew officers that would arrest people every day. On the flip side, myself personally, I could go a whole month without arresting somebody. But is that because I wasn't doing my job properly? No, it was because I was doing, in essence, what the public require me to do. And that is uniform policing, walking the beat, the Bobby on the beat that, you know, society has been crying out for all the time. So that visible presence made a difference. I got to know the shopkeepers. I got to know the local people who would commit crime. and you build up a rapport. Now, when I was new, there's more experienced officers sent me out to chase them. And I went chasing, arresting, only to realize that, I've just arrested him this morning, this afternoon, he's back out on the street. And when you watch the experienced officers, they'll tell you that's not worth it. Go and have a word with him or her and just tell them under no uncertain terms, not today. And you'll find that when you build up that rapport, remember, this person's committing crime, they'll, oh, all right, officer, okay, tend to be under the influence of drugs and homeless and all the rest of it, in and out of different shelters and stuff. Oh, all right, officer, they shut the shelter last night, I've got nowhere to go. You tell them what well, look, there's another place down the road, but you're going to have to walk down now and, just behave yourself and we'll be good. And it does work. But, the young officers come in with this gung-ho attitude that they can, sort of Rambo the world and arrest every single body. And it's the wrong way to go about it.
So, okay. We're giving fair points today from both points, just trigger factors and things that you're saying. I've had not a pleasant time watching my history parents or people around me involved with the law, and they give me some really horror stories and how they were treated, etc. And I guess that puts a bit more of fear. So it's like, why should you call the police? And I think at the end of the day, there are a lot of people that don't want to. They always they listen to other people saying you're a snitch or whatever. But when your life is in danger, you can't take the law into your own hands because there are consequences to doing those things. But if your life is in danger, you have to call the police. If your car breaks down, if there's an accident or something like that, you're going to be calling the police. And so, that is a motto that I hear all the time, despite that we hate them. I know it's not a very nice word, but despite that people hate them, they will still have to call them in certain circumstances. So it becomes an attitude test. And this is something I've learned. I used to give attitude for that uniform. Every time they encountered me, they wasn't nice to me. And I guess perhaps my attitude wasn't pleasant because I was intoxicated too. So I guess I take responsibility for that how I may have come across and escalated and made situations worse. But however, if I was having a mental health breakdown and I was distressed, there would be a valid reason. And I always felt that I couldn't get my voice heard because the person of the other color had more weight than I did just because of the color of the skin. And therefore, they seemed to be, to me, they seemed to have more compassion to listen to actually more the perpetrators than the victims. And I think when you don't get noticed and you do call police out several times for incidences that are reoccurring and you are the victim, that police force can let you down, and almost nearly people are going to their death because they're not being listened to. So how do we rebuild and put right? In my remit would be to educate and learn how to communicate effectively with that uniform, because we know that it's a trigger. Yes, we know it's a huge trigger, but if we don't communicate effectively, and I'm not saying that people don't, I'm saying that even if they do, sometimes you just get somebody sometimes who's not empathetic. I think, how do we bridge that gap? Sorry, I'm stuttering over this because I'm going back into triggers, and I feel that there are times where I have been failed by the uniform, but there are times I have called them in a different limelight. I'm not intoxicated. I've realized that it is my body language and my tone, where I can get the message across properly and get listened to properly and the work done effectively. And it becomes, if I can stay calm whilst I have that uniform in front of me. But immediately I'm thinking, am I being judged? Are they looking at me? Are they looking at me thinking, oh, just because of the color of my skin, I'm doing something else rather than the problem at hand? You know what I mean? So there's a lot of trigger factors. I think a lot of interaction with police and mental health.
If it's any consolation, as I've said before, my entire working career in particular has been law enforcement of some shape or form. That's not to say that I didn't grow up witnessing the atrocities that the Metropolitan Police in particular are guilty of. The Brixton riots and the Tottenham, Broadwater Farm riots and so on and so forth. The bungled investigation into the Stephen Lawrence murder, also the shooting of Mark Duggan back in 2010 in Tottenham. So there's a whole list, and that's not even to mention the deaths in custody of young black men. So I witnessed all of that, and when it's bad now, but it was far worse because black people in particular did not have a voice, and there was no organization or no entity to voice black people's concerns about what the police were doing and the disproportionate way in which black people have been treated by the Metropolitan Police in particular. So
And
I was just going to say, for me, to add weight to what you said previously, for me as a black man, as I've said, I saw all of that, but I still took a conscious decision to join the police to try to do better. Now that I'm away from the police, I too still have the same fears that you do, because I remember what happened, what I saw when I was a child. Okay. And as I got older and older and older, I saw what was happening. And doing my time, if I can put it like that, within the police as a black man, I saw a lot of indirect, and I've got to get that correct, indirect racism. And then I also saw some very direct racism, bearing in mind the time that I joined the police, they had just been branded institutionally racist by the Macpherson report, which was the report into the way that the police dealt with the Stephen Lawrence inquiry. Okay, so I still have, if I'm driving along and I look in the mirror and the police are behind me, I think, oh, what do they want? The only saving grace for myself is having been in there and know what their protocols are. I can relax myself a bit. They come to the window. Hi, we just stopped you for whatever. No problem, officer. Driving license, there you go. The car is taxed. The car is roadworthy. I wasn't driving fast. I wasn't doing anything. Let the officer do his or her job. And for me, answer the questions that they're asking you, nice and polite, quickly, get rid of them quickly. If you're going to sit there and engage and you only this and you only that, and you're just embroiling the situation, that doesn't mean that the officer did not come to the car with an attitude, because that does happen. And I've seen that. And one thing I must say also is that at the end of the day, the policeman or policewoman is the same human being as you and I. I just to give you an example before I hand back over to you, what I'm trying to convey to you. My police service came at a time when I just had my first child. My relationship with the child's mother broke down within the first year, and as a result of that, that then led me into the police. Now, when you join the police, you work shift work. I'd never worked shift work before. Weekends, bank holidays, Christmas Day, Easter Day, any day that they tell you to work, you work. And what I found was that was extremely difficult to try to raise my son, being a weekend dad, if I can put it like that. My weekends weren't mine. It belonged to the British Transport Police. That in itself then enraged the child's mother, because she felt that I was neglecting my duties as a father. Okay. But in my mind, well, I'm at work trying to raise money to pay for my child. So something going to have to give. And that situation for me, and this is just me personally, played out, 3-4 times a week whilst I'm at work. So I could be in the canteen, I get a phone call, blah, 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 need more money, or, when are you coming? You haven't been for 3 weeks. Are you coming this weekend? No, sorry, got to work. Oh, you're a waste of space. All of the rest of it, you can imagine. And that affected me because it wound me up. So I'm now a wound up police officer in my personal time, although I'm at work. My personal situation outside of my job is making me irritable whilst I'm at or doing my job. And you just happen to be the next person that I come into contact with, and you're going to be argumentative, you're going to be rude and all of the rest of it, then you're going to, in essence, receive a bad service from me. And I witnessed that quite a lot with a number of officers. Why is he always so angry? Yeah, you walk in, you say morning. Why is it a good morning? And then someone say, oh, his wife divorcing him and taking his children full custody and all the rest. Oh, right. Okay. I didn't know that. So the point that I'm making is that the policeman or woman, they might look like robots in all of their fancy gear that they wear now, but they're not. They're human, just like you and me.
Yeah, I totally understand when you put it in that way. If you see beyond the uniform, you'll realise that they're having a normal life, and that life can be hectic too. I got that. One more question, briefly. Do you find that people are reluctant to associate with an ex-police officer or a police officer, don't want those people in their circle? Has it been difficult for you? Do people shun away knowing that you're next to them and you bring up the fact that you're an ex-police officer?
I've experienced one or two people shun away, but not in the volumes that I thought that it would happen. And I guess for me personally, a lot of people take one look at me and they say, I can't believe you were a police officer. You don't look like a police officer, or you don't talk like a police officer, or whatever. And I think, obviously I'm a black man, and when people hear that, it's quite the reverse of what you asked me. People are more keen to ask me questions, what was it like in particular, black men, when they find that out, you would think that they would probably shun me because, like you used the word earlier, they think I'm a snitch or whatever, but they're intrigued to find out, what was it like? What did you do? Did you suffer in there? And those are the sorts of questions that I get answered. Yes, again, I have been shunned. I could, be introduced to somebody and sort of, oh, hello, nice to meet you, blah, 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 blah. and the person's like, yeah, whatever. And, you know, you sense things, and then you might say to your friend, like, well, what's his problem? He heard you was old Bill. He don't like old Bill. Oh, all right, then, okay, well,
Yeah.
that's for him then, isn't it? You know, so
You told me once that, you know, somebody point blank said they absolutely can't stand the uniform, whether you're ex-police or not. I don't want to hear the name police, and I don't want you in my circle. You know, that's a pretty bold statement, and it's a little bit of discrimination, because it's more like known by association. They always say once a copper, always a copper.
yeah,
I think at the end of the day, if we say once knowledged, always knowledged, yeah,
yes.
That's probably a better term of putting things.
Yes.
What you're doing now, and I'm about to, couple of minutes left, what you're doing now is actually great work from the community. So the uniform is off now, but the intelligence is there. What you're using is your past, your past to help people within the community. And we're talking about ordinary people, perhaps on low income or whatever else, that haven't got any right guidance, that may have had something happen to them, and you're guiding them with their rights, and you're helping them with how they should use their manners as well, and keep to the points and topics at hand. You're also asking them to retrack or re-step over, you're like a bit of a crime scene, to make sure that all the I's and T's are dotted, to make sure that these victims are having their rights. We're talking victims here.
Yes.
They're having their rights heard. You've helped many women out in resolving their cases, and actually getting them compensation as well because of injustices. You had a really bad case one point, which was considered racial bias, and it was also agreed with the IPCC to investigate into that. And I think you've helped a lot of people. You know, some of the cases that you helped, there's probably a lot, but if I reel off a few, you've helped pensioners that are actually even to the point of being condemned because they're feeding birds or something like that, you know. And so you're actually, where you're integrating the community is because you are Black, and some of the people that you're serving in the community are definitely white. You know, and it's mixed, it's diverse. So therefore, there's no, when it comes to crime, mental health and all of that, rights are rights, and a victim is a victim. And what you're trying to do is making sure that these victims are seen, heard, listened to, and respected. And at the same time is, you know, what you're teaching along the way is, look, because you've given a few pretty good tips tonight, what you're teaching on the way is, if you can keep calm and be knowledge with your rights, you can, you know, you can educate back to somebody that's you've just appeared, you know. And I think the final message that you'd like to say to the public, thank you for your interview. Where they can find you is at www.intelligenceserviceinvestigations.co.uk, where you do have a good look at that, because there is a lot of I don't think there's anything that you can't do. You help other charities, and you're just pretty amazing, really, aren't you? Thank you
very much. I wouldn't go that far, but thank you very much. I'll take that all day long.
Yeah, but I appreciate it, because there's not many people on here where this is not about race and or race wars or anything like that. This is about the understanding of what somebody went through, where we talked about being on the straight and narrow versus where you are. And I think I hadn't said too much, and I think we could come back again to elaborate on some crimes amongst the community. I'd like that. But thank you for your interview. I think we don't have enough time, but I'd like more time.
I can't beat the clock, unfortunately.
No, but I think if people are listening to this, if there is a specific topic that you would like to talk about, please do leave a comment underneath, or get in touch somewhere along the line with www.intelligenceserviceinvestigations.co.uk. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for
Will
having
you
me.
come back again next week?
Of course I will. Of course I will. There's so much to talk about.
There is, and I didn't even touch the size. And I would like to talk about when arrest and mental health, and I would like to cover that, and probably pose some questions and definitely pose some questions around that, around mental health, because I really want to talk about mental health, because I think damage can be done around this justice system. Just want to point out that what we see on the TV can be pretty scary. I do want to push out, was it Mangrove, the acts that I watched, tells you a bit about
small acts,
small acts. It shows you the reality, because it was a true documentary. It shows you the reality of just how tough things were, and what we're trying to do is break that cycle and build a community, because there is a lot of diversity in there. So it's about understanding now, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yes, and I think that's what we're going to try to do over the coming weeks, is do a little bit more understanding and hear other people's stories and journeys about their interactions and if it affected them mentally, scar tissue and triggers, etc. So thank you so much for your interview. I feel quite privileged, actually. I wasn't afraid of the uniform, even though I can see it in here, but I wasn't afraid of the uniform, because I know you're not a serving police officer anymore.
Okay. Well, I guess that does help. That does help.
I will say that I have been out with some really, really nice people, and actually police officers, even of the opposite colour, who have saved my life in certain circumstances.
It is difficult. You can't always tar
everyone with the same brush.
But the points that have been raised are valid points, and a hell of a lot more does need to be explored in our topics, but in general with the law itself, and how persons of color, because we often say black people, but that's because we're black and that's affecting us. But that doesn't mean to say that is in light of the recent terrorist incidents that have happened. If you're, and even in my time, that the bombs, the London bombings had just happened. So anybody who was wearing a turban or had a long beard or of male Indian-looking descent was stopped and searched. Okay, it was like a conveyor belt. It doesn't matter, young, old. Stop and search. Because
they had a job to do to make sure that they could keep the country safe, and that there wasn't going to be an explosion. But people took that as, they're discriminating.
But to be fair, that job had to be done. Yes. But it was difficult. It was a difficult task, because
we'll come back.
Just like anything else, it was used unfairly in some instances.
Okay. Thank you. And I think these are the topics that we'll cover over the years without trying to incite any kind of discrimination. That is not what we're about. We're simply spreading awareness into looking at life a little bit differently to what you're accustomed to, by hearing it from different angles and from experience. And we are definitely removing the discrimination to get the message across. Yeah, because that's what we're about. You can't build a community if you're going to go on hatred. It's about education, and nothing but education. All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate the conversation. I look forward to the next interview. Thank you.
I'll speak to you then.
Oh, I was going to say briefly, you can find you on the radio. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. Every Tuesday morning, Ipswich Community Radio, 105.7 FM. And the show is called The Crime Lab. And that's every Tuesday, 10 a.m. till 11 a.m.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tune into that.